solitary man. Hi, I'm Gary Moravchik, and welcome to Coral Castle. Built by one man and one man only. His name was Edward Leedskalnin.
Some believed Ed was actually a founding member of the Some believe Ed was actually a founding member of the CIA. And may have had some assistance in the building of Coral Castle. But others thought he just had the usual superpowers. But Ed would simply say that he knew the secrets to the building of the Great Pyramids. You know, it's too bad he's not around anymore. I got a couple of questions for the man. Just like any great mystery, this story began many, many years ago in a galaxy far, 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 well, actually, it began in what was formerly known as Mother Russia. Ed Leedskalnin was born in a small village outside Riga, Latvia in 1887. He lived a normal Latvian life. Ed stayed in Latvia until he was 26 years old. He lived a relatively uneventful life there, working in local lumber yards and learning a little bit of the family trade stone masonry. But at the very young age of 26, something happened to Ed that would change his life forever. He fell in love. Love. Amore. Mila. That's love in Latvian. You see, Ed had fallen for a girl 10 years his junior. Her name was Agnes Scuffs, or as he liked to call her, his Sweet 16. He proposed to his Sweet 16, and the wedding day quickly approached. However, Agnes did not. Ed started out on a remarkable journey to build an incredible testament to his true love, Agnes, and Coral Castle was born. Over the next 26 years, Ed carved, sculpted, and transported over 1,100 tons of coral rock, just to show how much he loved his Agnes. Personally, I think a box of chocolates and flowers would have done the trick, but hey, that's just me. This monument of love was carved by hand, by one man using tools made from junk parts and an enormous heart, with rocks carved so flawlessly that there are no chisel marks visible on just about any of the coral pieces, showing that Ed would have given Michelangelo a little run for his money. Ed could have used brick, aluminum siding, cement blocks, or a nice clay made from a good color of mud, but he used 1,100 tons of coral. 1,100 tons!
Amazing.
Here we see the entrance to Coral Castle. You can easily find the entrance because there's a big, huge carved piece of coral that says entrance.
If you ever needed to ask Ed a question, all you had to do was this. And he'd come running.
The 9-ton gate is a true monument to Ed's genius. The gate was perfectly mounted and balanced so that a child could open it with a touch of a finger. The gate is approximately 80 inches wide, 92 inches tall, and is 21 inches thick and weighs, are you ready for this?
9 tons! The gate fits within 1/4 of an inch of the walls on both sides, and to this day, nobody can figure out how he balanced it so perfectly and placed it into position. It's really amazing. I could ponder this all day.
After a hard day of carving and moving tons of coral, one might look for a place to sit and rest. So, Ed carved a rocking chair and perched it on top of a 1-ton solid block of coral.
Ah, it's good to be the king.
And just like every modern-day genius, Ed had a fascination with the stars. Along the north wall of the Coral Castle, you'll find the Polaris Telescope. It stands 25 feet high, weighs in at 30 tons, and is perfectly positioned to always point to the North Star.
Ed used this telescope to help design his sundial. I'm using it to spy on his neighbors. This is Ed's sundial. He made it with such precision that one can tell the time, any time of year, any day of the week, down to the last minute. In fact, if you look closely, you'll see that it's my coffee break. Okay, everybody, take 10. Anybody going for a coffee? Could you give me a double tall half calf skim cappuccino extra hot? Thanks. I'll be in my trailer.
The sundial Ed built records the time between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m., which are the hours that Ed believed a man should work.
With 3 union scheduled coffee breaks and a lunch hour, I'd say that's a pretty good work day.
Any visitor can see from this 5,000-pound heart-shaped table that there was a strong romantic side to Ed.
In fact, you could simply look around the entire castle he built for his girlfriend.
Earth angel, will you be mine, my darling dear, love you all the time, I'm just a fool.
Ed carved the Florida table into the exact proportions of the state of Florida.
It was here that Ed would envision the senators and the governor of Florida sitting down to discuss raising taxes. You know, I can just see the news trucks parked outside the gate now. Not really. He also built a bowl of water here to represent Lake Okeechobee so the senators and the governor could wash their hands or take a drink. Of course, I'd probably take a drink first, then wash my hands, but then I'd never know if somebody else put their hands in there first. But anyway, it's a bowl of water.
Like Donald Trump, Ed believed that every man's home should be equipped with a throne. And I don't mean the porcelain kind either. In fact, Ed built 4 thrones, his being the largest and most comfortable, of course, weighing in at a mere 5,000 pounds, thank you very much. And just to the left of his throne, he built his Sweet 16s, and just to the left of hers, he built a child-sized throne for the pending children. And a rather uncomfortable one, well, okay, a really uncomfortable one for the mother-in-law, hoping she would take the hint and keep her visits short. This is called the makeup chair, where if Ed and his Sweet 16 ever got into a little tiff, little brawl, argument, knockdown, drag-out fight, they could sit here and resolve their problems. Let me demonstrate how it works. Ed would sit here. His Sweet 16 would sit here. And after their problems were resolved, they would kiss.
Ed clearly envisioned having children. and built these carvings based on the childhood story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Here we see the beds and chairs for the Three Bears, and a heart-shaped chair for Goldilocks.
Ed planned on being a strict father to his children. We know this because he built Repentance Corner, or his idea of time out. He claimed that if his children ever needed to be punished, he would stick their heads through the opening, wedge it in with a block of wood, then sit and talk to them for over an hour. Ed forgot to install plumbing, but instead dug a well. And the water you see here is fresh water, and probably where Ed stored his food in jars to keep it cool. You know, you can't buy this at your local hardware store. From this well, Ed would fill his carved bathtub each morning. By mid-afternoon, the water would be warm enough for a bath. You will notice that the bathtub is just large enough for a man who is 5 feet tall, weighing only 100 pounds.
Here we find Ed's bedroom that he made for himself and his Sweet 16. Here we find a child-sized bed, a teeny little baby chair. Behind me is another child-sized bed, and just to the left of me, if you look very closely, is an infant's cradle. And I'll tell you something, the kid that would have grown up in that cradle would have ended up being one tough baby. Ed built Moon Fountain out of 3 pieces of coral. These 2 quarter moons weigh 18 tons each, and the full moon weighs 23 tons. And Ed turned it into a small fish pond. You know, I can just imagine Ed sitting here by the Moon Fountain, under the moonlight, with his Sweet 16, of course. Moon River. Ed was fascinated by our solar system and the planets. He carved this 20-foot tall crescent of the moon that weighs over 23 tons. And over here, we see Ed's model of Mars, and directly behind me is the statue of Saturn, which of course is easily identifiable by the ring around the planet. Both of those pieces weigh 18 tons each, and I couldn't even see Mars or Saturn through the telescope. The Great Obelisk stands over 25 feet high and weighs over 28 tons. It's taller than the Great Upright Stone at Stonehenge and just as majestic as the Washington Monument, depending on who's in office. It points directly up and has a Latvian star carved into the top of it. Pretty amazing stuff.
Ed built 3 reading chairs and placed them facing different directions to take advantage of the sunlight during the morning, afternoon, and evening hours. Ed built the sun couch to catch a few rays now and then. He believed that if he caught some sun from time to time, worked outside, and slept on an angle, it would cure his tuberculosis. Ironically, Ed died without a trace of the disease.
This is a Model T 1925 Ford axle. So what Ed did, he would roll this toward him, open the axle up, put in his vegetables, meat, whatever, close it up, push it back, light the fire, and in a few hours, dinner. Who knows? This could have been the world's first crock pot.
Ed used this triangular-shaped piece of coral as a turnstile, and it's balanced perfectly on a Model T Ford axle and weighs 6,000 pounds. And as you can see, it moves quite easily. Oh, and the only difference between this turnstile and a turnstile at, say, New York City subway is 6,000 pounds.
Here in the tool room, Ed stored his tools that he made from spare parts found from a nearby junkyard. Here we find Ed's AC generator, and they tell me it hasn't worked in decades. In fact, how long? 1950. Hasn't worked since 1950. So here's what Ed would do. He would put his hand around this crank, start rotating the wheel, And pretty soon, he would generate enough electricity to get the...
And finally, we make our way up to the two-story main tower of the castle. Ed built the indoor tower to be the new abode for himself and his lost love. It was raised from rocks weighing between 4 and 9 tons each.
You might find it interesting to know that there are 16 steps leading up to the main entryway. 16 steps. Sweet 16.
The main tower is a great place to be if a hurricane ever hits. Hanging from the ceiling is Ed's bed. He suspended it this way to keep off all the crawling bugs. How'd he keep off the mosquitoes? Here we find Ed's lazy boy chair, made from a horse harness, scrap metal, and some bicycle parts. Looks comfy. Oh, I asked him if I could sit in it. They said no.
Ed Scalnan was a frail, simple man who moved a mountain. How he actually managed this feat, no one really knows. Some say he understood the laws of physics so well that with a series of levers and pulleys, he pulled it off. Others say he was simply a miracle worker.
Regardless of what you choose to believe, Goldilocks Castle is truly one of the world's most fascinating wonders. One can only imagine as to exactly how Edward Scalnan was able to complete his home. The marvel is that we'll really never know. But after witnessing it with your own eyes, you'll recognize that you stood in a magical place where the impossible not only became possible, but a reality.